What if the boy destined to liberate the world was raised by the very entity that enslaves it? Imagine Monkey D. Luffy not growing up in the peaceful East Blue, but in the cold and sacred halls of Mary Jawas, raised by the king of the world known as Emu. If you want to see how the greatest pirate in history becomes the ultimate weapon of the world government, hit that subscribe button right now because this story changes everything you know about One Piece. Instead of a humble village surrounded by friendly faces, Luffy finds his playground within the massive walls of Pangaea Castle. He is kept as a strict secret from the rest of the world. Only the five elders and Emu know of his existence. The Gorosei look at the boy with a mix of absolute terror and forced respect. They are forced to bow to a cheerful child who runs around the empty throne wearing a simple straw hat. This hat is not from Shanks. It is a gift from Emu modeled after the giant relic kept frozen deep within the castle to mock the ancient prophecy. Emu treats Luffy with a chilling and possessive affection. The ruler of the world sees the boy not just as a son, but as a vessel. Emu is fully aware of the true nature of the Gum Gum fruit. They know it is the legendary Nika fruit. In this timeline, the world government never lost the fruit to the Red Hair Pirates. They kept it heavily guarded, and Emu made a calculated decision. The best way to defeat the reincarnation of Joy Boy is to control him from the moment he takes his first breath. They feed the fruit to the young and naive Luffy, raising him to believe that true freedom can only be achieved through absolute order and control. Luffy remains a cheerful kid, but his environment is deeply twisted. He watches the celestial dragons treat ordinary people like mere objects. His innate sense of justice and the ancient will burning inside his blood constantly clash with the dark lessons Emu teaches him daily. Emu tells him that the people living below the red line are chaotic and dangerous. Emu insists they need to be ruled with an iron fist for their own safety. Luffy loves the only parent he has ever known and tries his best to believe these words, but his heart always tells him a different story. But a bird born in a golden cage still yearns for the open sky. The breaking point arrives on a day that would forever echo through history. A massive fire suddenly breaks out across Mary Jawas. The legendary fisherman hero Fisher Tiger scales the massive red line to free the thousands of slaves trapped in the Holy Land. Amidst the blazing chaos, young Luffy wanders away from his royal guards. He steps out of the pristine upper halls and wanders into the lower levels of the city. This is a dark place Emu had strictly forbidden him to ever enter. Down there, the illusion of his perfect world completely shatters. He sees heavy chains. He hears agonizing screams. He looks directly into the desperate and tear-filled eyes of a young slave girl named Boa Hancock. For the first time in his life, Luffy feels a suffocating weight in his chest. His rubber body trembles not out of fear, but out of a profound and primal anger. He reaches out to break the chains holding Hancock. His hands stretch instinctively using a power he had always been told to suppress and hide. The royal guards finally spot him and scream for the young prince to step away from the escaped prisoners. But Luffy does not listen. A strange and rhythmic heartbeat begins to echo loudly in his chest. It sounds exactly like drums. Even at this very young age, the mythical fruit responds to his pure and uncorrupted desire to set people free. Emu watches this entire scene unfold from the shadows above. The glowing red eyes of the ruler narrow with a cold and terrifying realization. The years of careful brainwashing were failing. The ancient will cannot be tamed, not even by the absolute king of the world. Luffy stands firmly between the escaped slaves and the heavily armed world nobles. His small fists are clenched tight, and a furious glare is directed at the only parent he has ever known. He is about to make a choice that will either destroy Mary Jawas from the inside out or sign his own brutal death warrant. The heavy boots of the royal guards rush toward the young boy, but Luffy does not flinch. He pulls his arm back, stretching it far beyond human limits, and unleashes a desperate punch that sends armored men flying across the burning courtyard. The sheer force of the impact leaves the escaped slaves in absolute shock. Fisher Tiger, the legendary sun pirate, pauses mid-fight to stare at the small child wearing the holy garments of the celestial dragons. Tiger does not understand why a world noble is protecting them, but he knows a miracle when he sees one. He scoops up Hancock and the other terrified children, giving Luffy a silent nod of deep respect before leaping off the massive red line. Luffy smiles widely seeing them escape, but his smile instantly fades as an overwhelming pressure drops the temperature of the entire courtyard to a freezing cold. The air grows heavy and unbreathable. Emu descends the grand staircase, not rushing, but floating with an ominous grace. The remaining guards immediately collapse to their knees, pressing their foreheads against the scorched stone in absolute terror. Luffy tries to stand tall, but his small body trembles under the pure dark haki radiating from his adoptive parent. Emu does not yell. the ruler of the world never needs to raise their voice. Imu simply extends a long, shadowy hand and whispers words that pierce straight into the soul of the young rubber boy. Imu tells him that his compassion is a disease. Imu says that freedom is nothing but a chaotic illusion that brings pain to the world. A dark energy wraps around Luffy, lifting him off the ground and squeezing the consciousness right out of him. But you must be wondering what a god does when their ultimate weapon proves to be defective. Imu refuses to kill Luffy. The Nika fruit is far too valuable, and letting it reincarnate somewhere else in the world is a risk the world government cannot take again. If the boy cannot be ruled by love and ideology, he will be ruled by trauma and absolute discipline. Imu hands the unconscious child over to the 5 elders with a single chilling command. Break his spirit and forge him into a blade that cuts down the enemies of the gods. For the next 10 years, the cheerful boy who wanted to explore the world is completely erased. He is stripped of his royal privileges and thrown into the most brutal and secretive training facilities of the world government far beneath Mary Joyce. Luffy is not trained alongside ordinary Marines or even Cypher Pole agents. He is trained by the Holy Knights. Every day is a living nightmare of grueling combat torture and psychological conditioning. They force him to awaken his armament and observation haki through near-death experiences. Whenever his heartbeat begins to take on that familiar joyful rhythm of the drums of liberation, the Gorosei subject him to excruciating punishments to suppress the ancient will of the fruit. They teach him that his rubber body is not meant for bouncing and laughing, but for snapping necks and crushing rebellions. A decade later, a very different Luffy emerges from the Holy Land. The bright-eyed child is gone, replaced by a cold and silent young man wearing the immaculate uniform of the Supreme Commander of the Holy Knights. He still wears the straw hat, but it is no longer a symbol of adventure. It is a crown of absolute obedience to Imu. He is known across the Grand Line as the Black Demon, a phantom who appears only to wipe entire islands off the map when a buster call is simply not enough. His mastery over his devil fruit is terrifying. Instead of inflating his muscles for fun, he compresses his rubber body to move at the speed of sound, delivering strikes, imbued with advanced conqueror's haki that shatter the very air itself. His loyalty seems completely unbreakable, but the ancient fruit inside him is only sleeping, waiting for the right spark. That spark finally ignites when the 5 elders deploy him on a crucial mission to the South Blue. The Revolutionary Army has cornered a prominent world noble, and the local marine forces have been completely wiped out. The Gorosei command Luffy to execute the rebels and bring the Celestial Dragon back safely. When the Black Demon drops from the sky onto the burning battlefield, the revolutionary soldiers freeze in terror. They have heard the campfire stories about the rubber monster of Mary Joyce. Luffy steps forward, raising a fist completely blackened by lethal haki, ready to slaughter them all without a single ounce of hesitation. But before he can strike, a massive gust of green wind violently tears through the battlefield. The sheer force of the gale forces Luffy to slide backward, digging his heels into the dirt. The smoke clears, revealing a tall man cloaked in a dark green mantle. A distinct red tattoo marks the left side of his face. Monkey D. Dragon, the worst criminal in the world, steps directly into the path of the world government's ultimate weapon. Dragon stares intensely into the dead eyes of the young commander, recognizing the strange facial features that mirror his own. The revolutionary leader realizes the horrifying truth that the world government did not just steal his homeland years ago. They stole his own flesh and blood, and now father and son are about to engage in a battle that will shake the very foundations of the world. The clash of wind and rubber violently shakes the earth as father and son collide. Dragon does not launch a counterattack. He simply raises his arms coated in invisible haki to block the devastating barrage of punches coming from the Black Demon. Every strike Luffy lands carries the heavy weight of 10 years of torture and absolute brainwashing. The ground shatters beneath them, but Dragon refuses to strike back. He looks into the cold and empty eyes of the young man and sees the tragedy of a stolen life. For the very first time in over a decade, a name is spoken aloud on that battlefield that cuts through the noise of war. Dragon calls him Monkey D. Luffy. That single name makes the young Supreme Commander freeze for a fraction of a second. The Gorosei had completely erased his past, telling him he was a divine creation molded by Imu to cleanse the world. But hearing that name triggers a buried memory of a burning courtyard and a crying slave girl. Luffy shakes his head violently, pushing the memory down and channeling a massive amount of advanced conqueror's haki into his fist. He rockets forward, moving faster than the human eye can track, aiming a lethal blow directly at Dragon's chest. Dragon does not dodge. He steps directly into the attack. The blackened fist pierces through his thick green mantle and strikes his side, cracking his ribs and drawing blood. But instead of falling, Dragon wraps his strong arms around the young man in a tight and unyielding embrace. Luffy struggles trying to pull away, but the revolutionary leader holds him close, defying the lethal haki radiating from the boy. Dragon whispers into his ear with a voice full of profound sorrow and unshakable love. He tells Luffy that he is not a weapon of the gods. He tells him that he is a child of the sea, born to be free and born to carry the will of the D. The words act like a key unlocking a vault that Imu had sealed shut 10 years ago. A sudden and deafening sound echoes across the silent battlefield. It is not an explosion or a clash of weapons. It is a heartbeat. The rhythm starts slow but quickly builds into a booming cadence that sounds exactly like jungle drums. The five elders had spent a decade torturing Luffy to suppress this exact sound. But Dragon's ultimate sacrifice of taking a lethal blow just to embrace his son shatters the psychological chains. The drums of liberation begin to echo loudly through the South Blue. Luffy's hair starts to change color, melting from its natural black into a brilliant glowing white. The cold and lifeless expression on his face begins to crack. His mouth twitches, and for the first time in 10 horrific years, a sound escapes his throat that is not a battle cry or a military command. It is a laugh. A loud, joyous, and completely unrestrained laugh that reverberates through the clouds. The mythical sun god Nika forces his way to the surface, breaking through a decade of dark conditioning. The rubber boy bounces backward, floating in the air with a bright white aura illuminating the dark battlefield. The celestial dragon he was sent to protect falls to his knees in absolute terror. The world noble commands Luffy to kill the revolutionaries, immediately reminding him of his duty to Imu. Luffy stops laughing and slowly turns his head to look at the pathetic noble. The coldness is gone from his eyes, replaced by a burning and fiery freedom. He does not kill the celestial dragon because Luffy is not a murderer anymore. Instead, he raises a giant glowing white fist and smashes the noble's protective bubble into a million pieces, destroying his symbol of absolute power. He turns to the chained slaves on the battlefield, and with a single massive stretch of his arms, he shatters every single chain holding them captive. Dragon watches from the ground, clutching his bleeding side, but a proud smile stretches across his face. The ultimate weapon of the world government is gone. In his place stands the warrior of liberation. Luffy lands softly next to his father and extends a rubbery hand to help him up. He reaches up and touches the simple straw hat on his head. For years he wore it as a heavy crown of obedience to the ruler of the world. Now he takes it off, spins it on his finger, and places it back on his head with a wide grin. It is no longer a symbol of Imu. It is the crown of a free man ready to turn the world upside down. Far above the clouds in the silent and freezing halls of Pangaea Castle, the giant doors of the empty throne room slowly creak open. Imu sits in the shadows, gripping the armrests of the throne so hard the ancient stone begins to crack. The ruler of the world can feel the heartbeat echoing all the way from the South Blue. The ultimate plan has completely backfired. By keeping the Nika fruit close and trying to control the uncontrollable Imu has only managed to create their own worst nightmare. Monkey D. Luffy has not only awakened his true power, but he has now joined forces with the Revolutionary Army, combining the ancient will of Joy Boy with the military genius of his father.